A countryside manor house. It is like a man going to a far country, who left his house and gave authority to his servants, and to each his work, and commanded the doorkeeper to watch. Mark 13:34. Josephus describes a wealthy country home as a large castle and no way unlike a citadel. Life 48:246. Archaeological evidence has begun to bear out his words, showing that all such farms thus far excavated share four elements: an olive press, grape press, a tomb, and a protective tower some 33 feet high and containing several rooms. Some also had ritual baths. Such a home often had an interior courtyard enclosed by other dwellings belonging to the same extended family. Such manor farms began when people purchased land more than 2½ miles walk, the limit of a convenient daily journey, from their village of residence, eventually moving from the village to a house on their land. On such a holding, olives, grapes, wheat, or barley would be grown. Of course, the wealthier the farmer, the larger his holdings. Who is rich, says the Babylonian Talmud, Shabbat 25b? He who owns 100 vineyards and 100 fields and 100 slaves to work them. The homes of the larger farms could be termed manor farms or rustic villas. These homes contained both living quarters and an industrial area containing a wine or olive press. On the upper floor of the two-story villa were the living quarters of the lord and his family. The lower floor housed various foodstuffs and other supplies. In the parable of the man going to a far country, Mark 13:34, the doorkeeper acted as the manor house security guard. He would be on duty both to keep the house safe from marauders, as well as to be ready at a moment's notice to announce the master's arrival so the other servants could be roused to their duties. Some 50 to 70 people could occupy such a complex on a permanent basis. Most of these homes were built of field stones or roughly dressed stones, but carved column drums and capitals have also been unearthed in some excavations, attesting to the owner's attention to aesthetic details in the construction and design of their country homes. Sources of the period relate that tenant farmers were subject to an onerous taxation burden. They paid 1/3 of their harvest to the landowner and another third to the king. Jesus' parable of the landowner whose tenant farmers greeted his rent collectors with violence, Matthew 21:33-41, must have rung familiar to the audience. Close to 70% of the arable land in the northern part of the country was cultivated at the time of Jesus, owned by landed gentry. The landowner with his servants, crops, managers, and accountants must have been a well-known figure to residents of the Galilee, precisely the reason why Jesus based so many parables on this character. The owner of the property, as Matthew points out, did not usually reside permanently on the premises, Matthew 21:33. However, his manager did live on the property. Such a manager is mentioned in Jesus' parable about a certain rich man who had a steward, Luke 16:1. Drawing of imaginary manor house based on excavations in the Carmel region. The ways of the wealthy. Cosmetics, dishes, and applicators. A woman came having an alabaster flask of very costly oil of spikenard, Mark 14:3. As in our own day in ancient times, it was the wealthy class that had both leisure time and the means to pamper themselves. Roman ladies took care of their complexion with nightly facial masks. One mask, made of dough and ass's milk, was said to have been invented by Nero's wife, Empress Pompeia. So much ass's milk was required by Nero's wife, Pliny records that an entire herd of she-asses accompanied her wherever she went. Face powder was either white or red and mineral-based, moistened with saliva or mixed with an oil base. Veins at the temples were outlined with blue, brows and lashes were painted black or brown. Kohl, another form of blue, was painted over the eyelids and behaved to have medicinal properties. Fingers and toenails were often painted white. Oil was used as a hair dressing, as indicated by Mark 14:3. Women's hair was held in place with beeswax and sometimes piled high atop the head. Some of the hairdos were so intricate that the Talmud, Shabbat 94b to 95a, forbids undoing a woman's hairdo on the Sabbath because it would mean transgressing the prohibitions of building and demolishing. Contrary to popular imagination, only wealthy men had long hair, which required special care. Among the most interesting pieces of jewelry worn by wealthy women in Talmudic times was a Jerusalem of gold, a crown depicting the walls of the holy city. In the Talmudic tractate Shabbat 59a, the sages discussed whether it was proper for a woman to wear this heavy crown on the Sabbath day. The lady of the manor examines her reflection in a copper mirror while her husband enjoys the fruits of his vineyard. A comb with teeth small enough to remove lice, a common affliction. Necklace, rings, and robe fasteners discovered at Masada. Pins for fastening outer tunics. A manor house wine press. The treading floor. There was a certain landowner who planted a vineyard and set a hedge around it, dug a winepress in it, and built a tower. Matthew 21:33. A common stationary form of winepress was created by quarrying the treading floor from a rocky surface that was scored with channels leading the juice from a higher to a lower point into a shallow reservoir in which the residue would settle. The reservoir was divided into compartments, and the clarified juice drained through an aperture in the divider into the neighboring compartment. From here the juice was collected in clay jars and sealed with a mud cork, leaving a small opening through which carbon dioxide could escape during the fermentation process. Depending on the size of the treading floor, one or more persons would work in the treading of the grapes. Much rabbinic discussion revolved around wine production by Jews, since wine produced by Gentiles for the purpose of idol worship, known as libation wine, was strictly forbidden. Jews were to drink wine produced only by other Jews, and that wine was to be produced under conditions of ritual purity. For this reason, archaeologists often find a ritual immersion bath adjacent to a wine press. The man who owned this wine press probably hired his servants in a manner similar to the wealthy landowner of Jesus' parable, Matthew 21-13. Although that landowner's methods of payment were certainly unorthodox, a fact that would have kept the audience in suspense until the meaning of the parable was revealed.